And the subject for this morning is going to be H.P. Blavatsky, HBP, and the current Messianic Cycle. And our first speaker this morning is president of the San Diego Theosophists. He represents the ULT. He's a licensed psychologist, and in terms of one of the speakers yesterday, we can say he's one of the formers of ITC. He organized the ITC 3 times together with Sally already. His name is Jim Colbert.
That's good. Herman C. Vermillion was instrumental in inviting me to give this presentation on the Messianic Cycle from the viewpoint of the United Lodge Theosophists. In his invitation, he wrote the following: "So please keep in mind that the whole framework of the conference, we expect a presentation that will represent the ULT vision rather than a personal view."
It was not planned to have confidential information on the stage.
And he goes on and he says, "Although I know that there is no official ULT vision, as Gene Jennings expressed it, ULT has no central authority, no spokesperson, no governing body. ULT represents a set of principles and ideals as found in its declaration." True. So anyway, he also says, so it's a challenge for you to come up with what is the general view of understanding in ULT. So, this is very, very true what he said. But in responding to the challenge, I want it to be known it is not true that I have been a member of ULT since its founding in 1909. But it's very close. I was brought to Theosophy School for children in Los Angeles ULT at the age of 5. We're going to do this presentation in 3 parts. We're going to try to understand a little bit about the zodiac and the Messianic cycle, and give a little astronomy that fortunately people more adept than I checked out. And then we're going to do some perspectives on ULT, United Lodge Theosophists, and then the implications of some of the principles of ULT regarding the Messianic cycle. There was one, in my search through the literature on the Messianic cycle, there was one quotation that I found from HBP. She mentions it several other places, but the quotation is fundamental to what we're talking about. And Helena is nice enough to read some of these things. Please.
From HPB's Esoteric Character of the Gospels. There are several remarkable cycles that come to a close at the end of this century. First, the 5,000 years of the Kali Yuga cycle. And then the Messianic cycle of the Samaritan, also Kabbalistic Jews, of the man connected with Pisces, Ichthys or Fishman Dag. It is a cycle historic and not very long, but very occult, lasting about 2,155 solar years, but having a true significance only when computed by lunar months. It occurred 2410 and 255 BC, or when the equinox entered into the sign of the Ram, and again into that of Pisces. When it enters in a few years the sign of Aquarius, psychologists will have some extra work to do, and the psychic idiosyncrasies of humanity will enter on a great change.
The shifting to Aquarius is enabled psychologists like myself to have a good practice. So the key question that we're going to address here, if Helena could also read, because this is what it's really all about. Go ahead.
So the key question, in other words, around the time of HPB's life, there were two great cycles being completed. The first 5,000 years of Kali Yuga and the Messianic Cycle of approximately 2,150 years. A great being is associated with the time periods. The question is HPB that great being, and should we consider her in this way? My task is to consider this question from the standpoint of a ULT student.
This idea of great beings associated with different cycles, I think, is a fundamental key idea in Theosophy, because it really has to do with the hierarchy of beings, and it's the hierarchy of minds that we're talking about. Remember, in the Secret Doctrine, all comes from the universal mind. Does everybody remember that statement? It occurred to me, a theosophist had finally solved that problem of the chicken or egg. It was the chicken. It really was. Because in other words, it all came from mind. And I don't think egg was right in there. But anyway. Let's talk about the Messianic Cycle. The Earth, as we all know, spins. That's why we have day and night. Okay. It's also, the Earth is at an angle, is tilted. That's really why we have the 4 seasons of the year. And finally, the Earth also wobbles. Did everybody know that? I thought it was a kind of interesting idea. And it takes 26,000 years to complete one wobble. If you divide 26,000 years by 12 signs of the zodiac, you come up with approximately 2,150 years. That's the Messianic cycle. It's a shifting from one sign of the zodiac, as we're wobbling, into another. Question becomes, why does it wobble? And most scientists feel it's related to the gravitational pull of the moon and the sun. But there's another wonderful theosophical student here who thinks that actually the science needs to go further than that, and suggested the new theory having to do going beyond gravity, which include the concept of Fohat, and it may be related to the wobble of the Earth. I found one scientist, astronomer, that even thought that it was the movement of the entire galaxy. Remember, we are all part of the Milky Way galaxy, and moving around a center part of our galaxy. Somewhere I saw that if you look at the big arms of the Milky Way galaxy, there was something like 10,000 light years away from the center. But we're definitely part of that one arm. But anyway, the movement of this pull may have something to do with wobble. I thought his idea was interesting. We're going to show 3 slides illustrating some of this. This is simply the slide of, in the center of the sun, picture our Earth, and as we look up into the skies, we see these different signs of the zodiac. They're out there in green in this particular picture. If we go to the next slide, has to do with the wobbling of the Earth above us. And finally then, the Milky Way. There is the idea that in the center of the Milky Way there's a bar that is there. But apparently that's composed of massive stars right in the center. Okay. And just to repeat what the quest is here, Helena, if you could read that too.
The quest is to determine HPB's role as associated with the Messianic Cycle from the standpoint of the United Lodge of Theosophists.
Okay. Let's go back to make sure we got the key question here as much as possible. The terms Messiah, Avatar, Angel, Kumaras, all can be used interchangeably. If you read through the Secret Doctrine, these terms are used in so many different places that we're not quite sure what we're talking about. But there's also apparently degrees of these different divisions. And if Judge also used the term planetary spirits in this kind of connection. And if you could read that and also go back to that reference, I mean, that would be good.
Want me to read this whole page?
Yes, well, read what's here first.
William Q. Judge, taking his material from HPB's The Secret Doctrine, comments on planetary spirits, referred to as the highest Kumaras. They are the informing spirits of the stars and of the planets. The planetary spirits appear on Earth as avatars only at the beginning of every new human race and at the junction or close of the two ends of the small and great cycles. Their mission is to strike the keynote of truth, but once that has been done, they disappear from Earth until the following planetary Manvantara. From there, the truth is then generated from generations of adepts.
Very good. This, we can go to the next slide. Almost everyone is here in terms of Christianity. The Messiah will return. Have you all come across that particular statement? I thought it was interesting. If you could read this part, the basis of the Messiah's return.
There are listed 7 great avatars who are to come to each of our races. We are considered to be in the 4th round, 5th race. 5 of the avatars have come, which have included Krishna and Buddha. 2 have yet to come. The 7th is given as the Kalki avatar. This is the final destruction of the wicked, the renovation of creation, and the restoration of purity. This will take place at the end of the Kali Yuga, 427,000 years hence.
So in other words, if we just wait for 400,027 years, destruction of the wicked will take place, and the Messiah will return. But in other words, there's a little difference in the amount of years is when it is all going to happen. And finally, I just want to say, this is a diagram. There was one reference, too, I found, that the planetary spirit, and so another name we can use, the Watcher. And then, in other words, that would be over a whole round. And then we have the 7 races. And I found another reference had to do with where avatars could be a part of a part. So in other words, an avatar doesn't have to be one of these beings that come right at the beginning of a whole cycle. It can be a part of different degrees of the avatar. So does everybody get what this is all about, the Messianic Cycle? There is this one segment and moving around the constellation. and then there's a great being associated. So the segment is 2,150 years, and that happens every 2,150 years. You get, so it takes this 26,000 years to go. And so that is really where this comes from. Let's go to the United Lodge of Theosophists and principles of the United Lodge of Theosophists. There are, interestingly enough, a number of characteristics of ULT and ITC that are similar. And perhaps you could read that, Helena.
Robert Crosby, the founder of ULT, this is taken from The Friendly Philosopher, page 411, writes about his vision for ULT. Local lodges could be formed using the name and promulgating the basis for union, recognizing Theosophists as such, regardless of organization, open meetings, public work, keeping Theosophy and Brotherhood prominent, intercommunication between lodges, free and frequent, comparing methods of work of local lodges, mutual assistance, furtherance of the great movement in all directions possible. The motto, be Theosophists, work for Theosophy.
Doesn't that have the ring a little bit of ITC in it, in this vision? There are similar ideas, I think, that were presented a long time ago. The next principle we might think of is HPB and William Q. Judge are seen as co-teachers. And perhaps you could read that quote too, Helena.
Although William Q. Judge writes of himself as a student of HPB, there are other suggestions he was of the Brotherhood himself. Again, Robert Crosby writes, these writings, that is Judge, should be sought for and studied in connection with those of H.P. Blavatsky. That study will lead to the conviction that both were great teachers, each with a particular mission, that each were sui generis, that their work was complementary, and that neither of them had, nor could have, any successor. Page 414, Friendly Philosopher.
The thought occurred to this student that Adyar Theosophical Society, of the three founders, H.P. Blavatsky, William Q. Judge, and Henry Olcott, that the Adyar Theosophical Society took two of the founders, H.P. Blavatsky and Henry S. Olcott, and of the West, they took the other two, H.P. Blavatsky and William Q. Judge. And perhaps it's now come to the time we can all recognize all three founders. A major principle of the United Lodge of Theosophists, there are no officers or corporation bylaws. This is to get away from authorities. None of the speakers are announced by names, nor any of the articles that were written have any names attached to the articles. It's the idea of it's the teachings that's the only thing that's important. Another, I really never learned this thing of independence. Okay. Another principle of ULT, if you could read that, Helena.
Each ULT found in different parts of the world is totally independent. In other words, there is no central source which controls the activities of other ULT centers. This includes financial considerations. Each ULT must be self-sufficient. There is often a financial organization associated with each ULT center to handle the practical aspects of a center. However, there is no control by this organization over the activities of the ULT center.
Does everybody understand that? There's always a secondary organization which supports many of the financial things associated with ULT. Because a lot of people say, well, how do they do it? That's the way they do it. One of the final things, principle of ULT is that books for sale are primarily those written by HBP and William Q. Judge. There are no abridgments. Emphasis is given to the books written by HBP and W. Judge in their original form. There is the idea that some of these original plates of the Secret Doctrine are actually down there in the basement at ULT. Let's go to the three objects. You can read that too, please.
The three objects. This gives focus to the three objects of the Theosophical movement. Although the three objects were originally associated with the Theosophical Society, it recasts them as the three objects of the Theosophical movement.
I thought that was interesting. They've been switched from the Theosophical Society to the Theosophical movement and claim part of the ULT mission. Okay, let's talk about some of the implications of these principles. Isn't this wonderful? They got a nice sign here that I can read off to the side. Just want to say a few things of why HBP may be considered the avatar or the person associated with the Messianic Cycle. Remember she brought the East and West together? I was in downtown San Diego, and I stopped in front of this big, big building, 5 stories high. I said, my God, what do they do here? It was a yoga studio. I mean, it's just incredible the amount of Eastern concepts that have permeated throughout the West. This has all begun by a person named H.P. Blavatsky. She's really a pivotal point in all of history. And I think someday she will have to be recognized for that. Also, she restored the ancient wisdom. Everybody remember her writings going way back with the ancients, the ancients, the ancients? And then predictions for the world. And this I found to be fascinating. Could you read that too, Helena?
She warned, had the formation of the Theosophical Society been postponed a few years longer, 1/2 of the civilized nations would have become by this time ranked materialists, and the other half anthropomorphicists and phenomenalists. Actually, this has happened. Both Russia and China have adopted a communism directly related to the dialectical materialism of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Blavatsky's reference to anthropomorphism is assignment of human attributes to a personal God. Our world still lives with this. And the reference to phenomenalists is the psychic pull so prevalent in the New Age, from the Key to Theosophy, HBP, page 36.
Isn't that incredible? Some of the major currents of what's happening to our world is all predicted there, and the Key to Theosophy actually is to be found. Then on top of that is there comprehensive writings just about every subject known to all of us. You could go through a university catalog and find everything. What Blavatsky wrote is in all of the leading areas of the world. So some of the reasons why she might be considered the key person. Okay, maybe Helena will read this too. These are what we are finding by some of the principles associated with ULT. We may not consider her personality as that person representing the the Messianic Cycle. If you could read that, Helena.
So, 2 ULT implications, impersonality and anti-authority, that the personality of HBB may not stand for the Messianic Cycle. HBB did not appear to want recognition or glorification as a person. Her statement, "I have here made only a nosegay of culled flowers, and have brought nothing of my own but the string that ties them."
Okay. And if you can read this, next one on the only authority.
From the pamphlet, The United Lodge of Theosophists, Its Mission and Its Future, H.P. Blavatsky, from whom all that was known of such beings, the masters, initially came, had insisted that the only authority in her books was their inherent reasonableness, however extraordinary the conclusions to which they may lead.
Then finally, communications from the masters. HBB in many places indicates were masters of wisdom, real beings, who directly communicated to her much of the theosophical teachings. So if we're going to say one being was associated with the Messianic Cycle, we find in all the theosophical literature there were masters that communicated these teachings. And they come from many different sources. I thought this would be simply a way we could get a good discussion later on in our workshops of whether HBB would be considered the person associated. There's also, we're going to end with something that I really thought was a little risky. And as it turned out, it really is. I want to show this video, YouTube video, and it's music. Let me talk about it this way. I've tried to indicate to many people that what we need to find is a band of theosophy which is larger than any of the traditions we have in theosophy. And when I talk about that, I get a blank stare. What's he saying? What's he talking about? I really don't get any understanding. I thought music could, in a way, bring us, we could feel the depth of a greater existence. I think it's through art that we get that. And I ran across this YouTube video that every time I see it, I begin to cry. I also, it's associated with André Roux. And I know that I've since found out that in Holland, he's a little controversial. I didn't know that. And the little girl that's going to sing is well known in Holland. I didn't know that. So with that, for those that haven't seen this before, to try to get in touch with the feeling that's generated there, and just excuse Jim Colbert of picking the wrong venue for this YouTube. Okay, with that, could we do this? I hope in a way for some, it's made you feel that there are bands of consciousness within us that are greater than our immediate lives. There's, remember, Theosophy really gives the message of the higher self. And the higher self is that which reaches to everyone and everything and is not limited in terms of who we are. And perhaps in a way, the little girl singing is a way to make us understand there are these bands of consciousness that we can strive for. And I think that's what we need to do in order to find each other as brother and sisters of Theosophy. Thank you very much.
So it's a good tradition to ask questions after lectures, but for this morning we have a kind of a different idea, which is to formulate the questions as part of the workshop. So the speakers will be back on the stage when you come back from the workshop, so you can ask your questions. Having said that, our next speaker is also an excellent singer. Very few people know that.